Max Verstappen out in Q1 in Australia after completely losing control of the Red Bull. What seemed like a normal lap ended in one of the most shocking crashes of the start of the 2026 era. But the truly unsettling thing isn't the crash itself. It's the technical reason behind what happened. Before we go any further, I want to know your opinion. Do you think this was a mistake by Verstappen, or a sign that the new Red Bull is more difficult to control than it seems? And the big question is this. Are we seeing the first symptom that Red Bull's dominance in the new era may be at risk? Stay tuned until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. In this video, we're going to analyze exactly what happened to Max Verstappen during qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix, why he lost control of the RB22, and what this incident reveals about the new generation of Formula One under the 2026 regulations. Because what happened at Albert Park wasn't simply an accident. It was a moment that highlighted how delicate the balance between aerodynamics, hybrid power, and driver control can be in this new era. The scene unfolded in the final minutes of Q1 at the Australian Grand Prix. The atmosphere at Albert Park was already tense as the track was rapidly evolving and lap times were dropping lap after lap. At that point, Verstappen still didn't have a solid time to guarantee passage to the next session, so Red Bull decided to send him out for a flying lap. It wasn't a dramatic situation yet, but it was delicate enough to force the world champion to push from the first corner, knowing that any mistake on this street circuit could be very costly. Albert Park has also become a much faster circuit in recent years. The first corner comes after a long straight where the cars reach very high speeds, making that initial braking zone one of the most critical points on the track. It's where drivers must simultaneously manage braking, weight transfer, and the start of the car's rotation. Under normal circumstances, a driver of Verstappen's caliber handles this situation with absolute precision, but in the new 2026 Formula One, there's an additional element that greatly complicates this moment of the lap. When Verstappen enters the braking zone for turn 1, something unexpected happens. The rear end of the RB22 suddenly loses stability just as the car begins to shift weight to the front. The car slides violently, and for a few tenths of a second, it seems the Dutchman could recover with a quick correction, something he has done many times before. However, this time the car's behavior is too abrupt, and the Red Bull ends up running wide into the gravel before hitting the barriers, immediately bringing out the red flag and halting the session. The 2026 Formula One regulations introduced a much greater level of complexity in the interaction between hybrid systems, aerodynamics, and braking. This means that certain car behaviors can change in milliseconds depending on how the energy systems are being managed at that precise moment in the corner. One of the most discussed points is the role of energy recovery during braking. In this new generation of cars, the hybrid system has a much greater influence on the car's balance than in previous regulations. When the driver brakes, not only is the traditional hydraulic system at work, but energy regeneration also comes into play, recharging the electric system's battery. If this regeneration is too aggressive or occurs just as the car is changing downforce, the rear axle can abruptly lose stability. This is precisely what several technical analyses suggest may have happened at turn 1 at Albert Park. This detail is key because it completely changes the interpretation of the accident. This wouldn't simply be a case of overly optimistic braking or a classic driving error, but rather an extremely delicate interplay between software, energy, and mechanical balance. In other words, the car could have entered a regeneration phase just as the weight shifted to the front, causing a sudden loss of grip at the rear. When this happens, the driver has virtually no time to react because the car's behavior changes instantaneously and without warning. After the accident, all eyes immediately turn to the Red Bull garage. Not only because their star driver had been eliminated in the first qualifying session, an extremely unusual occurrence, but also because the incident happened right at the start of Formula One's new technical era. In situations like this, the team's reaction often reveals a lot about their internal thinking. And in this case, the message was clear from the outset. Red Bull avoided pointing to any direct fault on Verstappen's part and focused their discourse on the complexity of the new cars and how delicate the balance between hybrid systems and the car's braking behavior has become. This approach is no accident. The team is well aware that the 2026 regulations have multiplied the variables that influence the car's behavior. Energy management, electric motor mapping, brake bias, and aerodynamic balance now interact much more intensely than in previous generations. Therefore, the Red Bull camp has conveyed the idea that these types of incidents cannot be analyzed solely from the driver's perspective. In many cases, it's a chain of technical factors that activate in milliseconds and can completely alter the car's stability at the most critical moment of the corner. For his part, Verstappen had already made his position clear even before arriving in Australia. During the week leading up to the Grand Prix, the Dutchman expressed several criticisms of the technical direction Formula One has taken with the current regulations. In his view, the cars are increasingly dependent on electronic configurations, energy maps, and system management, forcing the driver to divide his attention between driving at the limit and managing multiple tools from the steering wheel. From his perspective, this reduces the direct feel of the car and can create situations where the car's behavior changes too abruptly. During pre-season testing, Red Bull had shown very strong performance potential. The car racked up thousands of kilometers in testing without major reliability issues, and several analyses suggested its race pace could be several tenths of a second faster than some direct rivals. This combination of top speed, aerodynamic efficiency, and long-run stability had created the feeling that the team could start the new era with a significant advantage over the rest of the grid. However, what happened in Australia introduces a variable that could change that perception. If the RB22 has a very narrow operating window, it means the car can be extraordinarily fast when everything is perfectly aligned, but also extremely sensitive when conditions change even slightly. Street circuits like Albert Park, where grip is constantly evolving and braking is very demanding, can amplify these kinds of weaknesses. In that context, even a small misalignment in the energy maps or the car's balance can cause a sudden loss of control, like the one we saw in qualifying. For Red Bull, this presents an immediate technical challenge. The team not only needs to understand exactly what happened at Turn 1, but also to what extent its design philosophy for the RB22 is sustainable throughout the season. Some dominant cars in Formula One history have been extremely fast but difficult to drive, forcing engineers to constantly work to widen the car's operating window. If the current Red Bull falls into that category, development work during the first few races will be crucial to preventing situations like this from happening again. In modern Formula One, every incident leaves behind a wealth of data that engineers can analyze in detail. Braking telemetry, pedal pressure, hybrid system status, downforce, and differential behavior are just some of the variables studied after an accident like this. The goal is to reconstruct exactly which combination of factors caused the car to lose stability by thousandths of a second, because in a regulation as complex as the 2026 standard, small interactions between systems can have very large consequences for the car's behavior. It will also be crucial to observe how the RB22's performance evolves at different circuits during the first races of the season. Australia is a very particular track, with heavy braking zones and rapid changes of direction that can expose specific weaknesses in the car's balance. If Red Bull arrives at the next races on the calendar and again demonstrates clearly superior speed, this incident could be seen as an isolated episode within a complicated weekend. If the Dutchman manages to quickly grasp the limitations of the new technical package, the team could transform a turbulent start into a competitive advantage against rivals who are still trying to understand their own cars. The real answer will come in the upcoming races. There we will see if the Australian crash was just an isolated incident caused by an extreme combination of factors, or if it represents the first warning that the new Formula One is much more unpredictable than many expected. And that is precisely the big question that remains open for all the championship's followers. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you think this crash was simply a one-off mistake, or a sign that the 2026 cars are much more difficult to control, even for the best drivers in the world? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.